Dystopian themes have been ever present in various forms of media for quite a while, notably video games, and it seems to never die. The most common game that comes to mind when you think of this would be, of course, Half-Life 2. But others like Mirror's Edge or more recently the now bug-free Cyberpunk 2077 are staples of this genre. Usually, these games revolve around the idea of breaking out of the system, forming a resistance of some kind and going rogue against the tyrannical overlords and achieving freedom, or at least more freedom, for mankind. But what if you weren't the main character? At least at first. What if you were just living in the world, as mortal as any other soldier, criminal, or civilian? You could try to carve a name for yourself, but you'll have to fight against everyone else trying to do so, or possibly work with them. Regardless of who your character is, you will have to start from the ground up, slowly building your reputation, your skills, and your arsenal. It is the grind to the top, and it's ruthless. Fortunately, there is a game fitted for this exact situation. A role-playing game matched with an amalgamation of Half-Life 2 and Cyberpunk's atmosphere, with concepts similar to RP servers that you would see on Gmod. A tactical shooter-style layout that can be experienced in either single-player or multiplayer that can go as big as your PC can handle. Pairing with a player-driven economy, with player-driven decisions, and a huge worlds, plural, to explore. Proper survivability mechanics, spaceships, tactical equipment for days on end, and absolutely brutal gunplay finished with a nostalgic PS1 low-poly style graphic. Well, unfortunately, that game isn't available as of right now. But since I can't wait that long, here's a video about what we know so far about Beta Decay. Now, before we move on, don't worry, not a sponsor. I first would like to say thank you for 1,000 subscribers. It really is such an amazing milestone, and I'm so grateful that you guys have brought me here. You can skip from this part ahead to the next part of the video if you don't care about this, but TLDR, I have some bad news. I am getting a job and video production will take a hit. So to make up for this, I do plan on streaming from now on forward. I'll provide the timings in the description or perhaps at this part of the video here. So if you are interested, come and check me out. Probably for starters, I will be streaming something like Stalker Gamma and we'll slowly branch out from there. Alright? Alright. Back to video. Beta Decay, to further elaborate, is an action RPG set in a nearby star system that was conquered by humanity and is now slowly falling into anarchy. The star system it takes place in is none other than the Alpha Centauri system. Now you might recognize this particular star system because it is very real and it's also the closest one to us being the solar system. Now there is a mix of fictional and non-fictional planets available to explore, but only certain areas of each planet are available. So you can't explore the entire thing like in No Man's Sky, which is honestly not an issue. The main point of Beta Decay is to throw you into a world where there is basically no stable order. Factions, corporations, and criminal syndicates are constantly at each other's necks, all seeking different goals that collide with one another, which eventually results in a load of skirmishes happening all around the system. I'll expand on the lore of that soon, but this is just to give you a rough idea of where you are. But who you are is a completely different question, and it is entirely up to you. The game devs really like to emphasize that this game revolves around the idea of what you want to do. The impact of your actions and decisions could vary from being completely insignificant to planet-changing, I guess. On one hand, you could be a simple, humble engineer, upgrading your spaceship and traveling around the planets and making money from doing deliveries maybe. And on the other hand, you could be the leader of your own faction, threatening the existence of others and placing your mark on the star system. Not many games have this exact idea of choose your own journey, but there is one in particular that not only shares this idea, but also has very similar settings and, I guess, vibes to it. More on that later though, promise. All of what I've explained is just the borderline surface of what this game aims to provide. Like, you can practically find this stuff on Wikipedia if you want. But since I want to do a deeper dive, I have spent some time analyzing and dissecting the footage or devlogs that we have received so far. As per usual fashion, I have divided the video into 3 segments. It is subject to change from the reading of the script, but if I'm not mistaken, it should be lore, followed by gameplay, followed by final predictions and summary. Do note that everything that I say should also be taken with a grain of salt, as it is a combination of hard facts with my own personal inferences and/or interpretations on the more ambiguous stuff. So please don't be mad when what I say turns out to be not true. We good? Alright. First up, Beta Decay's lore. While Beta Decay's lore is basically still a blank whiteboard, there are a few things that we know and a lot that we can infer from the data provided. So to repeat, the game takes place in the supposed near future of humanity, where mankind has surpassed just living on Earth and has decided to conquer a whole other new star system known as Alpha Centauri. Currently in-game, there is one exoplanet, presumably the most heavily colonized one, that is dying, decaying if you will. Hence the game name, Beta Decay. How near the future is honestly left up to debate, since the technology commonly seen being used does not exactly scream futuristic all the time. A great example would be weapons, as they range from early Cold War to, well, early 2000s, aside from the occasional laser gun, of course. I haven't seen anything exactly contemporary, like I would say MCXs maybe, but that's not to say that there isn't any futuristic tech, as cybernetics and nanotech have become a commodity with the Centauri citizens. Additionally, megacities akin to the likes of Night City do exist, containing high-rise towers that practically reach the stars, several mega districts like the mega plazas where people go and buy stuff, with neon lights scattered all around the city, kind of like a futuristic Hong Kong if you will. Spaceships, as you know, have also been confirmed to be something you can own and upgrade, and flying transports seem to be present as well. Very interestingly, cloning also does exist in Beta Decay. To my knowledge, cloning has not reached a point where organizations can exploit them to create infinite employees, but it has become a premium commercial service that functions like life insurance. It will most probably be very expensive in-game though, so much so that even leaders from any group might only be able to afford maybe 1 or 2 clone vats. In the star system of Beta Decay, there is no properly structured government, like say, on Earth. What exactly does this mean? Well, my interpretation is that the laws in certain areas of the system are not particularly reinforced, leaving almost like a power vacuum between various groups. One reason for the situation could be due to just the sheer overload of managing an entire star system. Assuming humanity has conquered the vast majority of the planets, it would undoubtedly be quite a handful to manage. Furthermore, there are additional obstructions that hamper the process, such as new space viruses, phenomenons that can randomly occur in varying severities, and aliens. Yeah, aliens are real. We don't know yet the variety of aliens that will be present, but there is one species that the devs have shown off, and they look and behave like the Antlions from Half-Life 2. So with this in mind, you'd ought to be curious as to what groups are trying to compete for this system, which I will cover right now. The 3 primary groups to look out for in this game consist of factions and divisions, corporations and conglomerates, and cells and syndicates. Factions and divisions are essentially kind of like your local government working with your local militias. They want what's best for the star system citizens and as such behave like the police of the system. Naturally, this group's leadership can be traced back to politicians, and while their intentions seem good, I wouldn't be surprised to see some level of corruption within the ranks. Their primary industries are quite diverse, ranging from mining and terraforming operations to space exploration and transport. Next, we have corporations and conglomerates. As a corporation, this group focuses much more on revenue than anything else. Profits can come from various means, but innovation and expansion are the key elements. As a result, we can assume that these megacorps would fund mercenaries to help carry out the dirty tasks, or in some cases, they might even have their own in-house specialized divisions to do so instead, something like Arasaka or Militech. Naturally, their main specializations revolve around R&D type work, but they also dabble in medicine.
Help!
And finally, we have cells and syndicates.
Aye.
These guys are your typical no-good criminals and mercenaries doing their typical no-good deeds. With the absence of a strong administration throughout the star system, these wrongdoers are just having back-to-back feud days, exploiting the star system for its lucrative opportunities. According to their description, these criminals seem to primarily target corporations and conglomerates, probably due to the fact that these corporations are already making bank off the system and they want, a slice of the pie. As for the cell agents, they appear to be some form of mercenaries, with their description praising them for their experience in the field being war, I guess. As such, the industries that this group specialize in are of the largest variety, from contracting services, transport and logistics, which I assume is smuggling in this case, to selling and or possibly manufacturing weapons and armor. Now, although I did say earlier that these guys are really wanting to obliterate each other, trying to obtain as much territory as they can, I believe some level of cooperation does exist amongst them. The corporation groups probably could coexist with some factions and divisions to a certain extent, and the cells, since they are practically mercenaries, could be hired by the other groups to fulfill their combat needs. Now, these three groups are just the categorizations of numerous factions, and within these factions could lie some bizarre societies. As we watch this footage, we can see a couple of soldiers standing on some sort of tall piece of gear. At first, I thought it was meant for recon purposes with the height advantage, and also perhaps maybe to traverse the land without sinking their entire leg into the swamp water. But the more I looked, the weirder it appeared. You can see the soldiers' forearms being strapped to the poles, however, they don't seem to struggle to get it loose. In fact, they seem pretty happy with them wiggling their body and head left and right. This could be really anything, but in a game like this, I don't think saying that this is a cult is, out of the question. And to finally address the big robot suit in the room, the Mobile Combat Vehicles, or MCVs as they are commonly referred to. Equipped with large miniguns, rocket launchers, countermeasures, and even a huge-ass cannon at the back, they are a walking machine of death. With all the artillery and armor it's packing, you could draw a comparison to a certain other metal-related machinery that happens to be quite solid as well. We don't know the exact lore of MCVs at this current point of time, but we can assume that they have been around for a while, since it's not exactly uncommon for you to spot them. If I didn't establish this already, you can pilot these things and fight infantry or other MCVs with them. Naturally, you might be curious as to how it looks like to fight with or against these MCVs, which brings me on to the next segment of this video, gameplay. Right now, R-Red. Now, there's a lot we need to cover for the gameplay aspect of Beta Decay, and usually I like to do it by order of excitement, but since we left off with MCVs, I'll just cover that and go down the list. MCV combat gameplay. So first, let's talk about obtaining an MCV. So as you can see over here, MCVs seem to have their own dedicated space in a base, typically unroofed since it's pretty tall and relatively well guarded. Anyway, once you kill all the guards, you'll have to board the MCV by climbing in from the top. And once you enter the pilot seat, you'll have to start flicking a bunch of levers to activate the beast. This is purely just for immersion, most likely, but I think it's pretty cool regardless. The view from the pilot seat is pretty realistic, with gauges displaying the oil, the fuel, aren't those the same thing? Rounds per minute and temperature, with TVs on the top corners of both sides and a heads-up display in the center window. Now, first-person combat in this thing, I can't lie, looks cool, but makes me want to vomit. This footage was around 7 to 8 months ago, so hopefully they patched this. But this fading thing really churns my stomach, okay? It pisses me off, and I'm just watching it. I'm not even playing it. Thankfully, you can go in third person, which tremendously improves this issue. Aside from that, the mechanics with piloting the MCV seem quite simple, although I have yet to see any footage of them using the big cannon on the back. When it comes to fighting MCVs as a foot soldier, however, you can imagine that the process is quite terrifying. You are, after all, attempting to eliminate a machine behemoth that fires a large caliber machine gun equipped with several rockets and a huge laser gun that it, rarely uses with your crappy Timu AT4 rocket-propelled device. Yeah, your best chance is to honestly just hide, because you definitely can't outrun the range and artillery of this beast. Okay, moving on. Infantry combat. Despite there being a presence of tanks in this game, like this T-92 Twardy tank with a copious amount of ERA strapped onto it, I don't believe that they have implemented tank combat yet. So until then, we will focus on infantry. Now, foot combat is quite well developed from what I've seen. You have your first and third person point of view to select from, with the third person POV being reminiscent of the Division's third person style of view. I don't know, something about it just really reminds me of that game. Maybe it's because both games are relatively fast paced. Moving on, foot combat, like I said, is rather quick, but not to the point of, say, Ultra Kill, but more like Max Payne. The combat is best described as brutal in this game. You run around slaughtering your enemies whilst you desperately reload and hide behind cover at times. You're not a squishy where you die in one shot, but you're not exactly a tank either. You can take a few hits before going down, and even then, you'll still be fighting. Imagine it like Stalker Gamma combat, but slightly more forgiving and much more animated. One thing I really do appreciate is that the shotgun damage is modeled to their real-life counterparts, where damage doesn't fall off by range, but by number of pellets hit, as seen in this clip here. So shotguns, like they are in real life, would be pretty good in close to mid-range combat. Speaking of close-range combat, CQC is also a thing in this game. As seen in the teaser trailer, the player can be observed engaging in fisticuffs with one enemy, and in the other clip, can be seen doing an MMA takedown on the other before stomping on their torso. Honestly, the ruggedness of these animations just emphasizes the desperation in the combat, like your character is really fighting for their life. On the other end of the stick, you have snipers for long-range combat. So far, I've only seen the M82 anti-material rifle in action, and yeah, they do indeed tear off the limbs of your opponents, which is great. One thing that I've seen a few people praise the snipers for is the scope view, where the game only zooms in with the scope and keeps the remaining background the same. I mean, to be fair, most modern realistic tactical shooters already have this feature, but I guess it's difficult to accomplish, so good job, devs. For the remaining highlights, you of course have your thermal vision and hopefully night vision goggles alongside your medium range weapons, like this heavy machine gun or this M16A2. Come to think of it, a lot of these guys have M16A2s and other NATO standard weapons, MP5K, G3, right? But I haven't seen any AK platform type weapons. Could be a lore thing. Perhaps 5.56 is the easiest to manufacture and smuggle in space. Who knows? Looking at all the weapons, you might be tempted to haul as many as you can back to sell them off later, like a pack meal. I'm not perfect, by the way, I am one of these people too. Unfortunately, well, actually fortunately, there is a weight system in this game. Not exactly sure how it may impact you, but it most likely will hamper your speed and stamina gain, like in Stalker. God damn. A few more things to mention are the exosuits. So exosuits simply function as a better protection than conventional body armor, whilst not hurting your speed completely, kind of like the ones in the Stalker series. Weapon modifications are also present, which reminds me of any other modern shooter game released after 2018. Wall penetration might become a feature at one point as well, with some early footage showing bullet tracers passing through walls. This could be easily classified as a bug, but I like to think that the devs are planning to implement some form of this. Passive healing is also present that may be subject to change, and crouch sliding is also a feature. One last thing, when the soldiers die, they do like a combined death noise. Kinda cool. With that done, that covers the gunplay aspect of the gameplay. Now for the more technical stuff, like survival. Although it hasn't been shown, survival mechanics like hunger, thirst, stamina, and sleep will be implemented in this game. Presumably something like in, say with me, Stalker. There is an economy in this game which is player driven. I don't fully understand what that means, but you can trade items or sell them in return for the system's currency, Centex, or Centex. I don't know. I have a history of pronouncing things wrong. It appears as though you can build your own outposts and or defenses like your spaceship, and you can also work super boring jobs, like being a janitor or a maintenance engineer, kind of like in Gmod Dark RP. Different helmet and body armor varieties have also appeared, going from your classic fast ballistic helmets to your iconic Atlin Spetsnaz helmet, and so far anything from Type 1 body armor to exosuits. Just to wrap up the gameplay segment, there are these things you can find on dead corpses known as biocells. Now at first I thought this was a healing thing since it was green, then I thought it was money since it was green, but I soon realized that the biocells are just battery cells. They seem to be quite important since everybody you kill will drop them. So most likely, this will be used to power almost everything that you have. Probably not your ship, but all of your equipment, your potential bionics, perhaps even your MCV. Who knows? Oh yeah, and you can also recruit soldiers to join your cause, explore the exclusion zone, which is the majority of the map you've seen so far, and customize your character. But you already knew that. Anyway, that's a wrap for gameplay. Now it might be too early to determine if the gameplay is good since we've only been shown the gunplay, but honestly, the combat gunplay alone is already enough to hook me in. To repeat, it does remind me a lot of The Division, which is a game that I thoroughly enjoyed, but also the Forever Winter, which is a game that you've probably seen before, but never actually played. Don't worry, I'm like you. Earlier, I did mention another game that had a surprising amount of similarities to Beta Decay, and chances are, you might have thought of this game as well. Rimworld. Yeah, weird right? But hear me out. Rimworld is a colony sandbox simulator where you can determine what direction you want your colony to head forward to, similar to how you can determine the future of your guy in Beta Decay. Despite the fact that Rimworld takes place in the far future, your colonists still use so-called industrial level weapons and armor, which range from bolt action rifles and simple steel helmets to AR-15s and flak vest, with marine armor and cataphract armor being the equivalent of exosuits. You can make money from various means like selling rice or hard drugs, and you can side with different factions in the world. Even in the new DLC, you can make your own spaceship to travel into orbit. Plus, you can always install more mods to make the game as tactical and realistic looking as Beta Decay. It's not a 1-to-1 copy, not even a 1-to-5 really, but you have to agree that the similarities are really there. As such, I'd say that Beta Decay could turn out something like Rimworld with a much more grounded hands-on tactical approach. But that is just a theory from what we know so far, so don't go too crazy with that idea. As a summary, Beta Decay is an incredibly ambitious game that is trying to accomplish a lot, but it seems as though it's taking the right steps. The core idea of this freedom to choose your own path is very appealing to me, and seeing it being put into a tactical shooter is really my dream come true. All that aside, thank you so much for watching. Tune in next time, which I really hope will be soon, and maybe you'll see me on stream, or maybe you'll see me on your shorts page. Yeah. Okay. Peace.